Perhaps as a 26th birthday present to himself, George slipped into Abbey Road to tape this demo of what became the title track of his first solo album in 1970. He had spent the previous November at Big Pink, the Woodstock home studio where Bob Dylan and the band had based themselves since late '66, and All Things Must Pass shows a distinct influence. Like the preceding Harrison demos for While My Guitar Gently Weeps and Isn't It a Pity, these songs were quite lovely in their simplicity. George recording several vocal parts, guitar and piano. All Things Must Pass and Something were especially beautiful, and Something had the additional bonus of an extra 4-line verse not included on the finished recording. Anthology 3 released all 3 demos in 1996. George's material wasn't really paid all that much attention to, producer Glyn Johns, who was also in the studio on this day, relates, to such an extent that he asked me to stay behind. He was terribly nice, as if he were imposing on me. According to Beatles historian Mark Lewison, Isn't It a Pity, which George later recorded twice for his album All Things Must Pass, was also offered and refused for Revolver. During the Get Back sessions, George attempted to interest the Beatles in All Things Must Pass, and it was carried out on January 2nd, 3rd, 6th, 8th, 28th, and 29th, with varied degrees of involvement, but it never went anywhere. Chapter 23 of the Tao Te Ching, a foundational work in Taoism, served as the inspiration for All Things Must Pass. I think I got the title from Richard Alpert, Baba Ran Das, but I'm not sure, George said. When you read philosophy or spiritual things, it's a pretty widely used phrase. I wrote it after the band's Music from Big Pink album. When I heard the song in my head, I always heard Levon Helm singing it. I was trying to do a Robbie Robertson-Band sort of tune, and that is what it turned into. The song's theme is moving on. This symbolized a number of things to George, most of them letting go of the Beatles. In a 1971 interview, he voiced his joy that the Beatles had broken up.
Well, all of that about her being the problem with the group, is that slightly silly that one woman could be so much of a problem?
No, the group had problems long before Yoko came along. Many problems, folks.
Can you remember who was the first to say, I bet we'll break up one day, that this won't go on, that this is sort of a dream, that we can't all stick together?
I don't really remember anything about the Beatle days. It seems like a sort of, previous incarnation when I think about it.
And a long time ago, like another life.
Yeah.
Do you regret any of it?
No. Don't regret really anything,
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened, and it was good, it was good, but it was also good to carry on, do something else. In fact, it was a relief.
The frequent usage of natural imagery in George's songs is also notable. George sings of sunrise, cloudburst, sunset, clouds, darkness, and morning, much like in Here Comes the Sun, finding comfort in Earth's cyclical rhythm. There is another, more tragic source of inspiration for George's mindset in All Things Must Pass. His mother, who was 59, passed suddenly in July 1970, a few months before the release of the All Things Must Pass album. It was now 6 weeks since the end of the Get Back recordings, 6 weeks in which, it seems, the Beatles had all but washed their hands of the entire project. One day in early March, John and Paul called Glyn Johns into Abbey Road and pointed to a big pile of 8-track tapes, the result of those 10 January days at Savile Row. "Remember that idea you had about putting together an album?" they asked. "There are the tapes. Go and do it." As one might well imagine, this was a stiff undertaking for Glyn. He was being given a free hand to compile the new Beatles album. Armed with the Apple tapes, Glyn booked time at his favorite studio, Olympic Sound, and began assembling the Get Back album.
We kind of walked away from that LP. We didn't really want to know. In fact, the best version of it was before anyone got hold of it. The Glyn Johns early mixes were great, but they were very bare, very Spartan album. But it's great. Now it'd be one of the hippest albums going if they brought it. They'd probably have bootlegs. Yeah, sure. But before it got its overdubs, before it had all its raw edges off it, that was like one of the best Beatle albums, because it was a bit kind of avant-garde, really, because it was just purely as we recorded it down there in Apple or on the roof. It was that, with a good sound on it from Glyn Johns, just a couple of mics over the drums, and that. Very basic, because he's a basic project. And I loved it.
Sometimes they say you...
I mean, some people can't understand that, you know, because Beatles was such a big deal. They can't understand why we should actually enjoy splitting up. But there's a time, you know, there's a time when people grow up and they leave home or whatever they do, and they go for a change, you know, and it was really time for a change.
Don't you think a lot of people just envied the idea of being world celebrities, though? And being,
well, some people, you know, would go on and on forever, singing the same tune and playing the same gig if they were making some money, you know.
Yeah.
But I think we'd all rather give that up and try going on our own and try doing something we really want to do. And if we don't make it, then hard luck. But as it happens, we've all got such a lot of like goodwill hanging over from being Beatles.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably wouldn't have me on the show if I hadn't have been one. Let's face it.
No, you wouldn't get here on looks alone.